Hi, everyone. I'm Corinne from Broadbeam. I have the pleasure of interviewing Rich Honiball from Nexcom. And Rich has a really different and unique retail model. So I had to ask him a lot of questions to kind of understand it a little bit more. So we are actually going to start with a video that helps explain that a little bit more. So just a quick introduction to Nexcom and what that looks like. Then we'll pepper Rich with more questions about it.
We have a history. Active duty, retirees, veterans, and reservists. We understand it's not just a job. It's a commitment, a calling to serve, a passion. It's Navy life. At the Navy Exchange Service Command, we take care of our own. And we've been with you since the beginning. Behind the scenes, providing encouragement with a smile, a pat on the back, a kind word. Our dedicated worldwide team is united in mission and purpose. Half of our associates are veterans, retired military, or dependents, so we understand your sacrifices. Nexcom is with you throughout your military journey, working hard to support you and proud to provide you and your family with exclusive benefits that will never end. Shop and save on brands you love, in store and online, all tax-free. We take care of you with an at-ease hospitality, whether you're on PCS orders or relaxing on leave, at home or overseas. We support all who wear the uniform, past, present, and future. Our teams keep you supplied at sea with comforts and essentials, ensuring access to technology, connecting you to family and friends. Since 1946, Nexcom has been paying it forward, giving back 100% of our earnings to support Navy families. We're all part of one team. You have your mission, and our mission is you.
So that's some serious brand purpose before Simon Sinek ever started drawing circles. Rich, we're talking about the evolution of retail today. And a big proof point is the fact you guys have been around for hundreds of years. So can you talk to us really about kind of the OG evolution of retail and take us back to the 1800s and Nexcom's origins?
So, and the irony is that if you ask me why it's called an exchange, nobody has been able to figure it out. And our sister services have the same thing. But go back to the late 1800s, we're here in New York, it obviously doesn't look like this, and you decide you want something, beer, comic book, a gift. You're going to go down to the local store. If you're out of town somewhere, you might travel into town. Imagine you're in the middle of, if you're on a ship and you're in the middle of a sea somewhere. The only chance you have an opportunity when you're deployed is when you come close to shore, there would be entrepreneurs in flat-bottom boats called bum boats that would pull up alongside and would sell wares to the sailors. Problem is, second-quality goods, high markup, not very convenient. So in the late 1800s, 1896, the captain of the USS Indiana actually opened up the first canteen, the first ship store. Anybody want to guess what the first product was? Who said liquor? Close. Beer. One product, beer. From there it expanded. And what he did was he bought the product wholesale, very small markup. Whatever profit was made went into a morale fund for family events and things like that. And so it offered convenience and it offered savings. That turned into more ship stores, a requirement that all ships had them, then ship stores ashore. And then in 1946, we became an official command, actually started by the first president of Macy's Herald Square. He actually was a captain in the United States Navy, Captain Bingham. Wow. Forgot to tell you that one.
So looking at things on a longer time scale is something that the Navy Exchange is pretty experienced with. And you have kind of a long tenure for a CMO, let's say,
Yes.
at Nexcom, coming out of Virginia Beach. Would you say that the brand has a longer time horizon or looks at KPIs and metrics on a longer scale, and that gives the brand a little more flexibility?
We do. I think so. And you notice that. So I hold two titles. I should start with that. I'm the Chief Merchandising Officer for the Navy Exchange, which is the retail part, which is about a $2 billion. We sell hard lines, soft lines, and convenience. And I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for the Command, which includes the 2 hotel chains, the ship stores, and uniforms. 30 years ago, we were the only game in town for sailors and dependents and even retirees in certain areas. Today, you can pretty much go anywhere and get anything, unless you're in Djibouti or Bahrain or one of the places that we serve. But if you're serving in Norfolk, Virginia, which is our largest base, you can go anywhere. So it's not I have a closed audience, but it's not a captive audience and anybody can compete for it. So we do look long term. And great conversation yesterday, by the way. It's when we're needed, when there's a crisis. An example, we grew during COVID. The commands and the customer recognize us and they come to us. Our goal is to look more long-term so that we are their preferred brand, their preferred retailer when they don't need us, and we want them to want us. And we can't do that by just waving the flag and saying, well, if you don't support us when you don't need us, then we won't be there. So we really have to take a long view of the customer. And we look at things like lifetime value and shopper yield and those integration points that really matter.
Yeah, so how do you define engagement if it's not ROAS sales this quarter? Hit these targets, although I'm sure you have those.
We have those. And we have those, and so I report to the CEO, who is a retired admiral. And he, it's funny, in my intake when I came in from the outside industry, my first buying job, by the way, was at Joseph Bank, so I love what Carolyn and Matt have done with the brand. We put the sailor first. They are our shareholders. But as he reminded me, said, any decision you make, put the sailor first, but we still have to generate a revenue because that goes back to them. Right. We look at the same KPIs that you would as a regular retailer, and 90% of the time we are a regular retailer. But we're looking more at the level of engagement. We're looking more, and actually one of the exciting things that we've done about, it'll be 2 years in April, we launched a loyalty program. Actually, we don't call it loyalty, we call it rewards. Because it's open to anybody. We should never charge for someone to be part of it. It's already representing 1/3 of our transactions and over 50% of our retail revenue. And we're able to measure the engagement, the advocacy, the number of trips. We have one of our profiles where we'll look at a customer who's a selective shopper. They may come to us for consumer electronics, but not for consumables. And we're looking to see how we can message that customer. Our goal is not to try and sell the customer something they don't need. I actually like the fact that our kids' business was down 5% in top-line sales, but up 10% in units. That means I offered that customer better value, and if my top-line sales went down a little bit, it didn't matter. I saved the sailor money, and we still had profitable revenue. So we look at how we can have the shopper shop across categories and take care of them in more areas.
And have you seen those long-term trends of being able to tie those engagement metrics or brand type metrics? We talked a lot about this today, and people from American Eagle were talking about how brand activations are really your vitamins, but I can't measure vitamins. I don't know that they're doing really good things for me. I'm just going to keep taking them every day. But it sounds like when you have hundreds of years of data points of really prioritizing the customer and looking at other engagement metrics, there are some stronger indications that that's true.
You'd think that, and you would hope that, and it isn't the case because we haven't kept the data for that long, and it's really only in the last couple of years that we've been able to keep those data points. And this is the story that it's a different type of thought process. When I came out of the outside world and joined the Navy, and I actually worked for the United States Navy, which is a really cool thing. I had spent a year with startups and in experiential marketing, and said, well, there goes experiential marketing. We have a base in Guantanamo Bay, which is not what you would think it is. It's like a 1950s town in Mayberry. And I thought I'd leave the experiential part behind, and I sent my head of planning to a customer appreciation event they were doing that was headlined by the Plain White Tees. And when you go to Gitmo on a rotator flight, you're there for 4 days, so it's a commitment. And I saw her post it on Facebook, and I went into our CEO and I said, why aren't we like blasting this on social media? And I started asking, he said, we just do this because it's the right thing to do for our customer. And so I say that as a transition point to say it's really only in the last 2 or 3 years that we've been capturing these data points as a way to try and better serve the patron, not hit them with a lot of marketing that they don't need, but really try to personalize the journey, understand what it is they need, and take better care of them.
Right. And I'm an agency person, so I know how valuable a military customer is because they show up on a lot of plans over all verticals, and they're a sure bet if you can get a loyal base of military customers.
Yes.
But can you tell us how you think about that and how your partners take advantage of the naval customer first and friends and family, and then a broader military customer network?
I'll try.
Okay.
And if I go off track, which I've been known to do once or twice, some good marketers do that, just reel me back in. So our customer base is active duty, dependents, and then retirees, and then some DoD civilians. 50% of active duty are Gen Z. They're between the ages of 18 and 24. They're making very important brand decisions at that point. They're cycling out of their childhood brands into their adult brands. And we have the opportunity to introduce new brands to them. Actually, American Eagle, we carry, we've had a relationship with them for the last year, and it's doing extraordinarily well. We've Vitamin Shop and Petco. And for those brands, it's been, yes, do you want to be profitable? Sure. But Andrew will be the first person to tell you it's about connecting with the military patron because they tend to be stronger when it comes to being an early adopter of new technology or new products. They tend to be more loyal. There aren't a lot of common threads in our customer base because you can go from a very entry-level person up to what we call a double dipper, which is somebody who's retired and now has a second career. Not sure I like the term double dipper, but I inherited that. But those common things that we can see is that this customer tends to be more brand loyal when the brand is loyal to them and serves them.
Right. And so what does not just waving the flag look like for the retailers in the room who want to engage a military customer?
I think it's having a connection. One of the things that we did, and I'll give you an example. Sometimes, I don't want to say rather be lucky than good, but sometimes the things that you do accidentally, as long as you're paying attention, can yield a great result. When we went into the pandemic, we had a couple of customer appreciation events that were planned. We didn't close because we couldn't close because we were on base. And if we closed, you didn't have. And our delivery program was called the Downrange Quarantine Program, where you had the Theodore Roosevelt that was under quarantine, and we had to deliver goods to those stores. So we innovate out of necessity, right? It was early April, and when we realized we're not coming out of this thing anytime soon. And it happens to be our anniversary, we said, look, we've got all of these musical acts that have signed up for a couple of customer appreciation. They're sitting at home doing nothing. We've got people that are at home around the world with loved ones deployed. What are we going to do? And we started doing these virtual events. One of the things, we were doing virtual, what we called couch concerts. And we did virtual 5Ks. We did a virtual barbecue competition, which I swear was not going to go well. And there's a very well-known grill company and a very well-known cooler company that helped sponsor it. And it was won by the wife of a Navy aviator whose call sign was Meat. So she was Mrs. Meat.
Oh, wow.
Not kidding. But the 5Ks have created this community of over 15,000 people around the globe who run these virtual 5Ks. I didn't think it would continue when we opened back up. It's only gotten stronger, and now we're turning them into hybrid events. And the brands that help support that have seen almost an immediate return.
Yeah. What's so interesting about those 5Ks, the insight you shared about why are people doing it? Well, because their friends and family members are deployed around the world. So virtual is a way of connecting and really being able to be the brand that connects families and friends from overseas is incredibly powerful and something I'm sure a lot of brands would want to emulate.
And sometimes we discover that by accident. That was an accidental discovery, and just like we over-index when it comes to gaming laptops, and you're thinking, okay, gaming, why would you buy a laptop? Well, because young sailors are on ships and they don't have the other one, and I may be taking away a question, or you may not be one that asked, but one of the you would ask, what's a bestseller? I think you asked me the question, what was
Yeah.
a bestseller I was
Yeah.
surprised by? I was in San Diego in one of our stores that takes care of the Navy SEALs, and there was an end cap of Pedialyte. And I'm firing off an email saying, you guys have to really look at the local stores, and there's no kids here, it's Navy SEALs. You know what Navy SEALs drink? Pedialyte.
Yep.
And you know what's actually now hit the market as hangover cures and what? Pedialyte. So it's interesting. We learn a lot from that.
Yeah, I'll say. You also do some proprietary research. And in order to serve your customers better, you had a very interesting proprietary study around inflation that helped change some of the way that you approached this year. Is there anything you can share, knowing that, by the way, Rich is a DoD employee and there's a lot that he can't share? Is there anything you can share from the proprietary study you did?
Yes, and this was less accidental, but we have very good relationships with some of the same research companies that you guys use. And sometimes I'd say 80% of the time, the way a general consumer behaves is the way our consumer will behave. But, we started to notice differences. For example, in shaving, you'll see a downtrend towards people looking at that as a shopping list item. Well, that's not the case in the military because there's still shaving requirements, and so that's kind of an aha. So last January, February, when, if you go back that far and, the Ukraine-Russia situation was breaking out, oil prices were going up, inflation was starting to go above 7%, and people were prognosticating, is it going to be more long-term? We did research with the military customer to understand, comparing to the general consumer, how are they reacting to inflation? Are they trading down more? Are they going without more? And we found that in general, they were hit harder by the economy. And you have to take into account the fact that, if you're active duty Navy, you're moving every 3 years. And you have to take into account spousal employment. You have to take into account that you're working for the Navy. You don't go into your boss and say, I'm going to quiet quit. No, you're not. So a lot of those trends that you would see, you don't see, and military families have to work much harder to make ends meet. And sometimes they're supporting a couple of households because the spouse is what they call geo-batching. So when we did this proprietary survey, we were able to really understand a little bit more from a nuanced perspective how the military consumer was behaving. We saw it during the holiday as well, and we tweaked our marketing and assortments accordingly.
Yeah. And being able to gather data in different ways is important to you. So can you tell everyone in the room why they should stop whining so much about the deprecation of cookies and third-party data targeting getting worse? Because they don't have it as bad as you have it.
No. It's funny. So our parent command is the one that controls what they call PCS when sailors move around. And so you would think, great, I have access to that data. I'd actually have an easier time accessing that data if I was in the outside world and buying it from a third party. We don't use third-party data. We use a lot of first or zero-party data. We have a lot more restrictions when it comes to cookies because of the inherent PII the respect that we have for the military, and you don't know what someone's position within the military is. I mean, when you find out if you send them something and they didn't sign up for it and they didn't want their neighbors knowing because they were in the military, because they're in a certain part of the military, it becomes real all of a sudden, and you realize this is why we have to protect certain things. And that's always kind of an odd thing, but we operate, I want to be careful how I say this, but we operate at a higher level because we have a tendency to understand how much it can impact it. That means we have to work harder for opt-in and to get information and to earn the information. The same thing you're dealing with right now, where as a customer, I'm not going to give you something unless you give me something of value. We've had to do that for a lot longer in order to get there.
Right. But would you say you have more flexibility with your customers and permission because of all the touch points and the fact they know how the business model works and are almost willing to see you capture profit in a way, or it's about value?
No, it's about value, but it depends. It's cyclical, and I think one of the things that we're learning, one of our most important touch points is really the physical store. You know, it's yes, we have an e-commerce business, and it is growing, but for us, it's really just become an extension of connected commerce. And I think, you know, as we've been working on our version of the store of the future, we've really I think we've taken for granted the opportunity to really position ourselves in each of the different formats of the store. We have convenience stores. We have what we call mission stores, which serve the fleet or the student population or the recruits. And we haven't been as cognizant of, hey, I'm going in real quick to a convenience store, coming back out. What can I put in as touch points that don't interrupt you, don't create friction, but tell you who we are, what mission we serve, or what value we serve? And so we're using our in-store properties in a much more dynamic way right now.
And with your role, we talked a lot about your focus on operational agility. Combining those things, how does that almost give a compound effect and interest in your marketing when you are able to combine the two, or be in control and really have a seat at the table of how you are adapting operations to serve the needs of the customer?
It's critical. And unfortunately, what happens is when we shut down in COVID and they shut down when a recruit goes into Great Lakes, they're there for, it's either 8 or 10 weeks. I can't believe I can't remember that. It's being taped. Don't show my boss. When we went into COVID, they were under quarantine for 3 weeks before they got there. We had to turn over one of our stores to an entirely different format within 72 hours. And I got to tell you, you know, you will never find a more passionate associate than the 12,000 that serve in the Navy Exchange, and we did it. And so one of the things that we've looked at is we've said, okay, how can we set ourselves up to be able to do that, not in a moment of crisis, but every day? Because there's always that change in consumer behavior. There's that change in whether an aircraft carrier turns right or left, or what happens in the world, or just what customers want. And so we're trying to build that agility into our stores and into our marketing so that we can be much more hyper-reactive when the consumer is saying, I don't like this, I want this. We're not there yet. It's not inherent in our nature to be agile unless there's a crisis, so we're working on non-crisis agility.
Is that probably the most important thing, really engaged associates to be able to do that?
I believe so.
Yeah.
It's funny, looking at NRF right now, I think there's this is my personal opinion, everybody is looking at tech as a way to offset labor. I don't think a lot of people have figured out if tech is there to replace labor or to empower it, or what the right equation is. You know, and I think that's the thing that we have to go through. I think we have to empower our frontline associates with better technology.
Yeah. So speaking of NRF, one of my favorite things you said was that you were enjoying this conference because there were more questions than answers. What were some of the most energizing questions that you've heard over the past few days that really kind of dovetail with how Nexcom operates?
Not so much energizing, but I would say refreshing. Mm-hmm. One of the words that I've learned to loathe is authenticity. Someone puts that in a brief, I'm going to just, the word's been so overused at this point. What was refreshing is, and yes, I'm slowing down because I want to be measured in what I say.
Okay.
I find sometimes that at NRF or some of these larger conferences, it's, look at me, we have the answers. They're not sure what the problems are, but they have the answers. And it was refreshing from my perspective to go this year and see we don't have the answers. We're trying to figure it out. We don't know whether the economy is going to go north or south. We don't know whether the customer is trading up or down. We don't know what's going to happen. And so there were more senior executives going in and asking the questions. And the word that I would pull from it, and I think it's a very important word from a marketing and a branding perspective, is vulnerability, is that admission that you don't know. And I think that's healthier for the industry and healthier for the consumer when you don't know and you start to listen to others around you and maybe we come up with better solutions.
Right. Well, not surprising that Nexcom wants people to be both humble, well-informed, and prepared as possible to be able to pivot immediately. Speaking of other military brand values, and I love that you said authenticity was a problem, because in military, amongst your constituents, your customers, and I'm sure the associates and people who work there, there's one thing that you're probably all better at than the rest of America, and that's service. But service is about putting your money where your mouth is in a lot of ways, and you can very easily see through a lack of authenticity in a way. So some of my questions, knowing that these are very service-oriented people, you have a service-oriented organization, how does that shape, how does the customers and their brand values and who you know them to be shape your organization and shape your marketing investment and how you think about the future and growth?
That's a great question. So right now, I would say that our frontline associates do a great job serving the patron. 40 to 50% of our associates have some sort of military connection. My dad was in the military. My mother's engagement ring came from the ship store. And the engagement that they have with the consumer is genuine. And I'll give you a very quick example. So how many of you have any affiliation with the Navy or understand, okay, so you know what CPO, Chief Petty Officer, and how important that is. I mean, that is a promotion to a non-commissioned officer that's a really big deal, and we celebrate it. And you have a store in upstate New York that's a really small store with 3 women that have been there for many, many years who have they come in and they bring in baked goods when the chief petty officer selects come in to get measured for their uniform. And it's such a wonderful level of authenticity. Now, when you're in branding and you're looking for consistency and experience, you're sitting there going, okay, well, you know, was it brand appropriate? Did they use the right colors? And so what we're trying to do is figure out that balance between how do we ensure that those are happening across the board? How are we giving associates the tools and resources to be able to do it and connect the dots within the brand, but not take away that genuineness with what happens? And we have to do that in the language that we use in our marketing. We have to do that in our social touch points. We have to do that. And that's something that really, and I'm lucky that I've got a wonderful marketing team that does this. We've been working on trying to build that more consistently so that we can better empower folks with the right tools, but still maintain that brand consistency and message.
Great. Well, Rich, there's a ton that we have learned and can learn from you, not only for the 200-plus experience that Nexcom has, but also of the different restrictions and ways of operating that you have. So I'd love to open it up to questions for Rich. I think it's a very unique model to be able to learn from and carry on to our more short-term retail needs.
Absolutely. Questions, reminder, or for those of you who just joined?
He's going to pick on you if you don't ask a question.
A, love it. C, good listener. And B, when you do have your question, tell us what's your name and where you're from. Not geographically, unless you want to add that too. That's fine too. Like what brand you're from. Or if you want to add like our friend who I think he's still here, like name, super awesome, and where you're from.
Or your military affiliation too. That's another one.
Yes.
All right.
Get it all in. Yes.
I didn't catch.
Wait, sorry. I don't know Stickler.
Mike from Sprinkler. I didn't catch. Can anybody shop, or is it specific to folks that are part of the team?
You have, in order to shop in one of our stores, you have to be active duty, a dependent, I don't like that term, but it's spouse or child, or retired, or medically discharged. To shop online, you can be a veteran. Okay.
And then one follow-up question. You were saying now they have choices, like it's, what would make them come to the store compared to like going somewhere else, like another just regular retailer?
Well, so if I go back 30 years ago, you know, and I'm going to be cautious when I say this. I'm very careful not to say brands, but you know, MAP pricing and you know, there was consistency in product. You didn't have all these diffusion brands, and you had consistency with pricing. So when we sold something, you knew what the value was. Well, today it's much harder to tell. And in some categories, there's a zero margin, so you don't see the savings even beyond the sales tax. So you can't just depend on that. Now, and actually you make the point that there's certain things we can't do that actually makes us, I think, sharper. And if you think about it from a general marketing perspective, one of the first rules they teach you is if you're dependent on value as one of your, if you're dependent on price savings as one of your brand hallmarks, go back to the beginning and restart, because you cannot depend on that. So we can no longer depend on just saving somebody money. So how do we make sure that we have the right products for you? How do we make sure that we make it convenient for you? How do we make sure that we give you a level of service? How do we make sure that we give you head-of-the-line privileges if you're in uniform and you have a very quick time to shop? Those are the things that matter. So I'm going to give a little bit of a wishy-washy answer and forgive it. So number one, we are the Navy Exchange, but you can be in any military branch to shop us, just like Navy can shop at AAFES or MCX. So we look at the full military spectrum. Second, we always get crossed up whether we're looking at households or whether we look at individuals, and there's a lack of clarity sometimes with the data. I would say about 25% of the military in general will shop us. Obviously, when that goes into Navy, that number reaches above 60%. If you look at the fact that we sell uniforms and you have to buy the uniform from us, it goes probably to 100% of active duty. But much like Matt and Carolyn were talking about, that's a macro moment when you have to buy the uniform. We have to pay attention to the micro moments when you can choose somebody else. So hopefully that's put it in perspective. The bigger number for us is if they only buy the uniform or they only buy their Red Bull and a snack, that's where a lot of the opportunity is.
If it's quick.
Okay, I'm Diana Fillers from Brand Innovators. What are you doing to distinguish yourself from the competition, say like a Walmart or Amazon or Target?
I can give you a very simple answer. Not be like them. And I don't say that as an insult to them, but the first question I asked when I came in and I tried to understand the ecosphere is I was asking the team, who are we, what do we do? And they'd say, well, we're kind of like Macy's attached to a Best Buy, attached to a Walgreens, with a little bit of this, with a little bit of that. And my next question was, well, who should we be? And inherently there was that pause, and it was, we should be the Navy Exchange. And so we can learn from our competition, but we're not trying to be Walmart or Target or Amazon. We're trying to be the Navy Exchange, and sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that. But I think that's inherently what we keep in mind.
That's spot on. Thank you not only for the amazing insights, but for supporting the people that do what they do every day so we can sit here and enjoy this, and for your family doing the same. Huge round of applause.